Hello, this is Lord's Legion and welcome to a brand new movie review, and would you look at this? For once I'm not reviewing an MCU film, but instead I have an early review on Deadpool 2, which is very typical of me considering that I'm a British bastard. And in the UK we tend to get movies earlier than most people. And seeing as how this is an early review on Deadpool 2, this will not contain any spoilers, so don't worry in terms of that regard. So without further ado, let's begin with the review. Now, it's no secret that a lot of people have been concerned in relation to Deadpool 2, mainly because the first one was almost a lightning in a bottle. And there was also some mixed signals in relation to Deadpool 2, which wasn't really a good sign. But the real question is, does Deadpool 2 live up to the hype? Well, if you ask me, I'm not sure if I love Deadpool 2 as much as Deadpool 1, but even with that being said, it's still a very solid sequel. And when it comes down to which film is better, it mainly comes down to personal preference, because both movies do have different flavours that separate the two films from one another. Now, when it comes down to the overall story, it is pretty straightforward for the most part, as we have Cable, who is suffering from a terrible future, and in order to prevent that certain future, Cable must kill a mutant child in the name of Russell, only for Deadpool to protect the child from Cable. But along with that, we also have some twists and turns here and there. And although I do think that the overall story is a little too formulaic and that I do wish there were a bit more variety, at the very least the story works well enough. And at least the story isn't too complicated. Now, it's no secret that Ryan Reynolds is the definitive Deadpool. But this time around, we do see a different side to Wade Wilson. Because behind the mask and the jokes, we do see more of a vulnerable side to Wade Wilson, both in terms of physically and emotionally. And it is great to see that this movie does focus on Wade Wilson as more of a sad clown. And there's a real good balance between the tragic side of Wade Wilson as well as the jokey side of Deadpool. Plus we also have the introduction of Josh Brolin as Cable, and I've gotta say he is a really badass character. And I like how Cable is pretty much the yin to Deadpool's yang, in that both characters are so different from one another, but at the same time they sort of work together. I do wish that we do get to see a bit more out of him, but from what I've got, I think he's a pretty kick-ass character and I can't wait to see more of him. Not to mention we also have Sassy Beat as Domino, and I've gotta say she is a really fun character. And whenever Domino demonstrates her powers on screen, it really looks cool. Again, like with Cable, I do wish that they did a bit more of this character, but in hindsight I think that Domino is a really enjoyable character and I can't wait to see more from her also. Plus we also have Julian Dennison as Russell, and usually I don't tend to like child actors, but in this he does a really good job. He's tragic, sympathetic, understandable, and at times even funny. Sure, he does act like a bit of an angsty kid, but it does work within his character. And in terms of all the characters who came back from the first film, I feel like that they were pushed to the side in favour for the new characters like Cable and Domino. But out of all of the characters who came back from the first film, I do feel like Colossus had the most screen time, and he was just as enjoyable as he was in the first film. And we also have Negasonic Teenage Warhead, who this time around feels almost useless in this film. Which is a shame because I really liked her in the first film, but this time around they didn't really do anything with her at all. And we even have Vanessa, who despite how she does lack in terms of screen time, she does share some of the most emotional scenes with Wade Wilson. Although within the first 5 or 10 minutes of the film they do something completely unexpected with this character, to which may piss some of you off. And if anyone is still skeptical about Deadpool 2 being somewhat of a prequel to X-Force, they really don't set up the team at all. And in a way, it does sort of mock some team-up movies such as The Avengers and Justice League. So don't worry, it's not an X-Force trailer. Now, going into Deadpool 2, it is clear that this film is much bigger, faster, and crazier than the first film. And for the most part, I actually really enjoyed this angle for Deadpool 2. And even though this film clearly has a bigger budget in comparison to Deadpool 1, it still maintains the charm that the first film had as well. The jokes are funnier this time around, the action scenes are more memorable, and there's a ton of surprising characters and cameos sprinkled around this movie. But even with all that being said, my biggest gripe with Deadpool 2 is the fact that the pacing just feels quite off. The first act of this film feels incredibly slow, but then by the time you get to the second and third act, it ultimately becomes jumpy. I don't mind the jumpy structure within the second and third acts, given how this movie is more balls to the wall, but I do wish that the film was a little more polished in certain areas. And even though the effects in this film feel superior in comparison to the first one, there is a certain CG character who just feels completely off. If any of you have seen the rumours beforehand, you know exactly who I'm talking about. And as messy as the CG seemed, in a weird way it does kinda add to the charm that this universe has. But overall, whether or not Deadpool 2 is better than the first film, it really comes down to personal preference. Whether you prefer the more structured and grounded take of the first film, or the more balls to the wall action flick in the form of the second one. But even if you feel like Deadpool 2 is slightly disappointing in comparison to Deadpool 1, there is still quite a lot to enjoy from Deadpool 2. And like I already said, I'm not entirely sure on whether or not I like this film more than the first film. I still think that Deadpool 2 is a very solid sequel. And so for the final verdict for Deadpool 2, I am sort of torn between an 8 or a 9, but as I currently stand right now, I'm going to go ahead and give an 8.5 out of 10. If you are a fan of Deadpool as a whole, you won't be disappointed with this film. However, if you're expecting Deadpool 2 to be more like the first film, you might be somewhat disappointed, because this one is crazier than the first. But really, it all just comes down to personal preference, and either way, I think Deadpool 2 is a worthy sequel. So what do you think of Deadpool 2 if you've already seen it yet? Do you think it's just as funny as the first film, or do you think that's a little lackluster in comparison to its predecessor? Comment below and share some thoughts. And as always, thank you guys for watching this video. Please like and subscribe. Take care and have a good one.